Okay, now we are going to get into what is kind of the thing that has made me feel kind of weird. Representation at the expense of doll play. So going back to those 4 tenets, we have hair play, fashions, playability, imagination. And at what point does a doll become a specialty doll and a special edition doll, or a like something that is a collector's edition, something that is kept up on a shelf, something that you point to and you say, this Barbie looks like you, but you can't play with it, or you can't play with it in the way you play with other dolls. While I was reading a critique of the Sew and Style dolls, which that video should come out in February. I don't know when this is coming out. We'll fucking workshop it. We'll figure it out.
Sew and Style. S-I-S, Sew and Style. 3 best friends with style and hair. Grace, Trishelle, and Cara. Spray it, curl it. A girl with curl it. Sew and Style. Spray it. Sew and Style. Straighten it. Sew and Style. Twist it, thick or thin. Twist it. Sew and Style. Curl it, straighten it, twist it, style it. Sew and Style. Girl. From the world of Barbie, Sew and Style dolls.
And how the dolls were not black enough. And that the dolls were not representative of everyday black existence, black girl existence. That their hair wasn't black enough, that their stories propagated unhealthy stereotypes about black people and where black people are. And then there wasn't enough diversity in their features. The issue I have with points 1 and 3 are the fixes change Barbie from what she is. And we end up getting a solution to that in the, like, when you talk about the Sew and Style dolls, because the creator, Stacey McIrby, goes on to create her own line of dolls that, you know, are different than Barbie, but they fulfill those same things, and they do bigger things. But we have to go back to point 1, being that you have to make a product that's going to sell. You have to make a product that's going to sell outside of the black demographic. And you have to make a doll that a child wants to play with, because for the most part, these people aren't collecting them. I would have collected it, but, you know, a lot of these people are just buying a doll for their child to play with. And if the conversation around black hair is long and complicated, but the idea that long hair and blackness are mutually exclusive is laughable and insulting. The idea that the only way to have black hair and black features is to have tough features and to have the most, because it's like walking a fine line, because if you slap a supposed black nose on a white person, that is simply a white nose. However, if you put a white nose on a black person, that is an identifiable, in some cases, that is an identifiable feature that does not, quote unquote, belong there. I even cringe to say that, because I think if you're born with the feature, then that's what it is. But in the context of a doll, where you were trying to convey something through visual shorthand, putting a variety of black noses that I think looked black. Those dolls looked like me. Those dolls looked like people I knew. I had a very positive reaction upon seeing them, because as a person who grew up in the South, I saw a lot of people who looked like me, and then I would go up to Baltimore and I'd see a lot of people who looked like me and dressed like me.
I decided to just run it until the camera died, and so the camera died, and thus we cut to a week and a half later, in which I start our next section. There's going to be some recapped information, but I say it differently, so we're all going to be nice and we're all going to cope.
2 weeks. I am less mad. Okay, so this is specifically about the racial experiment, like the the Sew and Style dolls and an article I read about them, and how this one woman goes on this entire rant about, like, a pretty large part of her criticisms about the doll are about how they are not black enough, that they appear to be mixed race, in that is there are no mixed race black people, and thus that is not the black experience, but also the fact that they are not, like, there are 3 tones of black in the dolls, and then it's like a dark skin, a medium tone skin, and then a lighter tone skin one, and they all have the same pinched kind of Barbie of 2009 eye, and they have different noses, but with the darkest one having the widest nose. But they have the flatter nose. They don't have little ski slope noses. And their hair not being black enough. And it's like, do you want your child, for the purpose of this, we'll say child. Do you want your child to play with the doll? Or do you want to put the doll on a pedestal and say, this is what black excellence looks like? Aspire to this. Don't touch it, because that's not an exciting play experience. It's probably frustrating, and I don't know, there is something inherently more, like, racist to me if the only black Barbie doll you have is busted. That freaks me out. Like, if you go somewhere and you're like, oh yeah, my parents used to buy me all types of Barbies, and then you see the Barbies and, like, their little white Barbies are still, like, normal looking, and then their black Barbies look like they were constantly the villain. Like, I want all of the Barbies to have a fighting chance of still looking good in 10 years. When reading critique of the Sew and Style dolls and how the dolls weren't black enough, throughout, though the doll, and thoughts that the dolls weren't representative enough, and that of everyday experiences, because the dolls moved from LA to Chicago. Now, there are black people in Chicago, but if you need an excuse for why the friend of Barbie is no longer friends with Barbie, it's not just because she fucking clovered her way to the black school. She Toros'd her way to the black school because she moved. She moved to an area that has primarily black people, and the people she's going to school with and meeting are black. Baltimore, New York. There's still white people in New York, but, you know, they're trying to Detroit. St. Louis. Like, there are places where we exit, Mississippi, where we end up being the majority of the people. Their hair not being black enough is frustrating, because do you want a fashion doll that is a fashion doll to a fashion doll that does playline things? Like, I guess these people, I don't know. I don't want to make assumptions, but do you want a playline doll to be playable, or do you want it to be like my statue of black woman excellence? There's this level of pedestal that black women end up getting put on. Most recently, I can see it with Stacey Abrams of Georgia, that she essentially, like, waylaid her own campaign in both 2020 and 2022 to make sure that the Senate was won. That at a point it became clear that she wasn't going to be the one to dethrone Brian Kemp, and thus she got a lot of people out to vote. And she was an inspiration to a lot of people to get people to come out and vote. And she became Jesus Christ of the white liberal. Let black women be people. Over anything else, we should be aspiring for black people to be people. Black women to be people, not superheroes. Not to be on t-shirts. Not to be, Stacey Abrams, that. Do you have a healthy way of showing that you respect someone's work that doesn't involve lionizing them. I want you to sit and think about that. The criticisms of the doll state that there wasn't enough diversity in their features, which is like, these are dolls printed in plastic. These are small-scale dolls printed in plastic. Especially like Barbie dolls, like the Rainbow High dolls at least have like a wide-ass face and like a body. Like, you can print some shit there. And also the amount of money being spent on printing shit, because Barbie and Mattel did not know how to respond to the amount of children who stopped playing with dolls to play with video games. The moment another competitor to child entertainment hit, Barbie freaked. It didn't know what to do. Like, obviously Barbie made some video games, but they weren't really, they're fashion. They're like, they're baby's first computer CD-ROM. And then a Laura Croft ripoff for some reason. They're not like the great bastion of Barbara. They're, Barbie movie, Uncharted, this ain't. With points, 1 and 2, point that fixes changes to Barbie from what she is. And there's a conversation around black hair. It is long and complicated, but my own issue with this conversation is, do you want them to dream big and play big with dolls that look like them, that scattershot hit them? I literally, after I finished filming that video, like a couple days later, I was taking my hair down and I flat ironed my hair, and in the time, the humidity it took me to spray my hair outside with hairspray, my hair was puffed. That is deeply frustrating. Do you want a child's play experience to be deeply frustrating in the name of realism? I do not want that for children. Especially if you're trying to say this is positive and you should aspire to this. Get ready to be frustrated for forever. But the idea that long hair and blackness are mutually exclusive, that was part of the problem, is that the hair was long. There was play to be had with the doll, but if all you're doing is looking at the doll and you go, they've got waves in, you need to get a grip. It's laughable that I know people, black as the day is long, from my own family, who have healthy long hair. I am not one of those because I have health concerns. But the idea that it can only exist through braids, locks, and weaves shows your own lack of diversity in the black experience, and I do find that to be frustrating. It leaves me in the question with their own blackness, blaming that a doll with low or no hair play is a doll I simply would not want to play with. In 2009, the curly hair dolls were seemingly available was the curly hair seemingly available, the Canetalon, the Propofeverol hair that was available for dolls was not good for curling. And again, this doll does have doll hair technology that I think is very interesting, but whatever. It would lead to a messy looking doll that after a few attempts at play would simply not be fun to play with. There's a simple misunderstanding of what a Barbie is and what she's to play with. She is a toy first, inspiration second, if at all. The third point being relevant of Barbie's features, as there's only one way to look black, or even some level of blackness that should be able to be marked phenotypically only. I'm not saying that there isn't some level of this, because even myself talked about how I was excited about the black noses on these dolls. However, you pair 2 plus 2 is different than this seemingly wide stance of this doll is too light, so she's simply not black. She is somehow exoticized. Is disappointing to hear someone who is a writer. This is 2009. This is before the screeds of anyone who was being recorded by newspapers. this was a writer, a culture writer, who felt that that was something that they had to put into their criticism. Don't love that. Barbie's face paint in 2009 was very pinched and angled, and it changes to the face that creates this doll, like how it's layered. And so, like, my favorite Barbie face is a Superstar, and I also like Midge. I like, God, I cannot remember her name right now, but it's one of the Midge faces, and she's pouty and soft and round. She's got big eyes. You change the nose on that, and you've got a black face. You've got like a Ryan Destiny kind of face. Like, you can make the doll blacker without it having to be some... And obviously we have had less time on making black dolls because of racism and what they believe will sell. But like, you gotta meet capitalism halfway. When you make changes to a doll's sculpt and mold, how much money is Mattel willing to sell on a doll that might not sell well? Further alienating others from the doll that has to make money. Again, there's lots of different reasons. There's a lot of different fears I have with giving a majority white audience access to a black doll. That feels like you're opening yourself up to, it's kind of like, it's very much the invitation to the barbecue, that the moment you give one to someone and then they show their entire ass. I don't need to give a black doll with black hair to a little white family, and then in 10 years, you see on social media that they're like, everyone went through a phase where they crucified their Barbies, and the only Barbies that are crucified are the black ones. That is not an unreasonable thought to have. It's also, again, expensive. Doll making and doll production is very expensive, and in the great wide scheme of things, Mattel can afford to take a risk, and they do every once in a while. But they were taking that risk in 2009, and it paid off because we did see more standard black Barbies. I'm still generally insulted that certain features can only come from the same perceived exoticism. It's ignorance of the different places in Africa that our features come from. And at the end of the day, Barbie is a fucking toy. I've been saying get a grip a lot because I've been dealing with some unreasonable people who seem to have olive oil on their hands as they try to grasp at the point. But there's like a level, I feel like I'm saying get a grip while I have, over the last 3 days, yelled about dolls. Over the last 3 weeks, yelled about dolls off and on. Everyone in my life has heard about these dolls at this point. But it's very important to me that we don't scare off people from including us, but also that they do it respectfully. And I believe that these sew-in style dolls were so interesting and so respectful. They're black and they're beautiful and they're interesting. They have culture. I commented about they had a Rockaware line. They apparently had a Baby Fat collab. These were of the culture as much as a corporate doll can be of the culture. I think if you don't want Barbara, stop trying to change Barbara. Yeah, I don't know. I was very upset by this at the time, and I was yelling before. But I was upset about capitalism that day as well. I'm less upset now. I'm mostly just exhausted. There's like no one way to play with a Barbie and or one way to be a Barbie and be a Barbie girl. At the time that this video is being finished, the WGA strikes are over, but the actors' strikes are still going, so. But, like, there's so much, like, there's so many things about, like, this, like, perceived need for a Barbie. Like, sometimes at some point, like, the thing you're describing is a skateboard. Maybe you don't actually like bikes. Or maybe you like bikes a little bit, but you'd be much more happier playing with a skateboard. And that I don't think a bike should have to change itself. There's room for both in the market. But you cannot be surprised when one day you come and the skate bike is gone. I don't know. I think this is probably my worst take. But I feel very strongly about it, that there are just some people who are weird about. And then I just kind of ADHD'd into making TikToks. So, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at Megan_blush_. I don't know when this is coming out, but vibes, baby.